What do you think? Is he coming back? Is he going to stand?
I don't know. I've been reading the same things that I think everybody has from from the political editor of the Times newspaper, Stephen Swinford. But beyond that, I just don't know. But I think more generally, this has just been an absolutely extraordinary period in British politics. We all sort of lived through the Brexit referendum, some cases just before that, the Scottish referendum, and then sort of the difficulties of the Brexit years under Theresa May, the meaningful votes, the indicative votes, and all that. And then, yet we've managed to somehow exceed that with this sort of drama of the last few days. And I think what we have seen, though, is that the Conservative Party clearly has lost confidence in Liz Truss. That's why she's decided to go after such a short period in office. And I think we've seen yet again that the Conservative Party is willing to be completely ruthless when there's a leader who isn't delivering for the country.
Yes, I mean, they had enough confidence in Liz Truss to make her Prime Minister not that long ago. So that's the bit at which most of us, floating voters, people who'd no more join a political party than go to the moon, that's the point at which we just don't get it, I'm afraid, Henry. You'll have to explain.
Well, as an astronaut in those terms, I mean, I think the difficulty that Liz Truss had is that she didn't win the MPs round. She came second, but only narrowly. And there's also obviously, she just beat Penny Mordaunt, and there are also other strong performances, including Kemi Badenoch and Tom Tugendhat and others. And then she went to the membership, and she won a much narrower margin than David Cameron did or Boris Johnson did. And yet she chose to rule in a very divisive way. She didn't do as she talked about during the campaign, building a government of all talents, bringing in sort of serious figures from all different parts of the parliamentary party. Instead, she sort of built quite a narrow team. She got rid of a lot of experienced people. And I think that was part of her problem again. So, right. I mean, the Conservative membership did obviously ultimately vote for Liz Truss, but it wasn't an enormous mandate. And it was certainly much narrower than we'd been led to believe by some of the polling, particularly the early stages of the campaign.
Can we just talk about what lies immediately ahead then? Jeremy Hunt is not standing. We know that much. Surely he'll have to stay as Chancellor, because if there's another Chancellor appointed by the next Tory leader and therefore Prime Minister, we really will be in farcical territory. So that means that the economic policies of someone to the left of the Conservative Party will be dominant, and that won't suit the right of the party. So what are they going to feel about that?
I don't know if I really buy that sort of left-right divide. I mean, Jeremy Hunt clearly did back Remain in the Brexit referendum, but he's also shown himself to be quite on the sort of harder right side of the party in some other respects. During his very brief candidacy for the leadership of the Conservative Party earlier this year, he was one of the candidates pushing for the biggest reductions in corporation tax. So I'm not sure it's sort of completely easy to put Jeremy into a sort of left of the party badge. He's talking a lot about compassionate conservatism, but I think what he's really been asked to do is come into an almost technocratic role after the sort of Liz Truss mini budget with Kwasi Kwarteng was so universally rejected by both the markets and the public. I think Jeremy may be likely to remain as Chancellor, but I don't think we could say that for certain. I think it depends who takes over the leadership and what they decide to do. Obviously, somebody like Rishi Sunak, who's clearly a contender for that, during the period where he was running and ultimately lost the Conservative leadership race with the membership, was making a series of predictions, many of which have been proved true. So you could argue, some of his supporters will, that were he to become Prime Minister, the markets could take reassurance from that. But ultimately, I just don't know. I think it's too difficult to predict what's going to happen over the next few days. I think what we will know, though, is that the new Prime Minister, whoever he or she is, will only have a weekend before they need to make that statement on the 31st of October and reassure the markets.
Yes. Well, perhaps some people listening would say they couldn't do any worse than the predecessors had done. Do you honestly think, though, that there is enough that binds the Conservative Party together as a unified political force than divides them? Because I'm sure I'm not alone in watching the chaos of the last 48 hours and thinking, you know, if that was a kid's party, you'd phone all the parents and say, just come and pick them up. You know, enough.
I think it's been a deeply depressing time for anybody who's any member of the public, when people are at home worrying about their energy bills, about rising food prices and so on. It's to see the sort of circus that's happening in Parliament is frankly disgraceful. So I don't think anyone would defend what's been going on, not least Conservative activists. I'm a former councillor myself, as well as a political advisor. But I do think that the Conservative Party, to your point, needs to decide that they actually like each other more than they enough to actually want to continue trying to form a government. Boris Johnson won the Conservative Party a large majority in 2019 on the basis of a manifesto which was committed to levelling up the country and uniting many parts of the country after the divisive Brexit years. And I think the more we can go back to that, the better that the Conservative Party will find things, because that manifesto, after all,
Do you know what? That's just such an interesting phrase, though, Henry. They have to decide to like each other. I mean, they must, you must go into politics with some sense of belief, mustn't you? Not just a desire not to fall out with the person next to you.
I think that is absolutely true. And I think the Conservative Party has no right to govern no more than any other party does. But equally, there's no necessary need to have a general election, as long as the government can find a majority to deliver votes and deliver what's called supply and confidence questions through the House of Commons. That's basically the budget, and confidence, which is sort of, is the government able to command the majority in the House of Commons? Then they're entitled to continue to govern. And of course, there is a wide range of different views within the Conservative Party at the moment, but that's not unusual. And indeed, within the Labour Party, there's also a very wide range of views. What we've seen in the recent days, of course, is that the Conservative Party poll position has plummeted to depths not seen for a very long time. But it's also the case that the Labour Party is doing well, really, as a result of the Conservative Party's woes, rather than an active view by the public to sort of decide that the Labour Party is somehow different from where it was before. I don't think the public are enormously enamoured with Keir Starmer. Clearly, he's had a good Labour Party conference, and he's done quite well at ridding the party from the kind of rumours.
But Henry, even a conservative, passionate conservative supporter like yourself has got to acknowledge that there are many people in the country now who would really settle for a person some people might perceive as a decent dullard. I mean, that's what most of us have now got the appetite for, frankly.
Yeah, look, I think that's certainly the case, but I think that may also be true for whoever comes next to lead the Conservative Party. What I think the majority.
Okay, well, let's go back then to the idea of Boris Johnson, which is where we started. I mean, would you consider someone like Boris Johnson the sort of person who would come back and clear up a mess? It doesn't seem very likely. He's the sort of person many people associate with making a mess.
I just don't know the answer to that. I mean, obviously, he's more than capable of speaking for himself. And but I think that what we did see is that the Conservative Party under Theresa May also reached an extraordinary national low. I think she reached 9% in the European election polls. She either came fourth or fifth. I can't remember exactly now which position we were knocked into. And then Boris Johnson managed to unify the Conservative Party and then take it just a few months later to a huge election victory, where all kinds of seats across the so-called Red Wall switched to Conservatives, many for the very first time in the last 100 years or so. So I think I don't think rule anything in or anything out. I think what we've seen over the last few months is politics is very difficult to predict.